Hello, everyone. I am back here again today to talk some more science with you. Yesterday, we talked about ecosystems and habitats. A habitat is the environment where each specific animal lives. There could be several different habitats in an ecosystem. So, worms can live in the soil, birds can live in the tree, squirrels and things like that can also live in trees. Other insects build their nests in other places. So each ecosystem has several different habitats, and the ecosystem is the entire environment, including living and non living things like soil, air, water, and then the living things like animals and plants, and bacteria and fungi. Okay, so just a quick review. A change in an ecosystem can affect how well an organism can live and survive there. So if you take a look at this polar bear, they live in the Arctic. Well, in the Arctic, there's a lot of ice caps melting, and the polar bears rely on those ice caps, the ice, to hunt. When the ice is melting, it has nothing to stand on and it can't fish. So polar bears are really suffering because of this. But they do have a thick layer of fat to keep them warm. Again, I stated yesterday with the Arctic fox that it has the white fur. The white fur traps in heat. Underneath the white fur is dark skin, which attracts sunlight, and the white fur traps in the heat. Also, it does help them to blend in when they're hunting so they can't be seen. They're excellent swimmers with webbed feet, and they can swim for long distances to hunt for food. So, we're going to talk today about adaptations, changes to organisms that help them to survive. Okay, over time, the polar bear developed webbed feet. The more webbed the feet, the better it could swim, the better it could hunt. Therefore, over time, polar bears with more webbed feet survived and passed that trait along to its young, and the better traits were passed down because the better traits were surviving. And that's how evolution takes place. Here's just a couple review questions. A change in a habitat does not cause changes in the organisms that live there. This is false. Changes to an environment or an ecosystem or a habitat will eventually lead to changes in the animals because they will either adapt or die. The ones that can adapt will pass the adaptation traits along because they're better traits, survival of the fittest, and those that don't have the beneficial traits will die. An individual can survive an ecosystem change if it moves location and finds the resources it needs. This is true. So, animals can do one of three things: they can adapt, change, they can move and find an environment that is suited for their needs currently, or they will die. If an organism does not move locations or adapt to change, what will happen? It has to either move or change or die. Letter C, it would die. Okay, so moving on today, and we'll talk about adaptations. We'll just talk about here ecosystems and habitats. Just another quick review. Organisms have characteristics that enable them to survive in their specific environments. Take a look at the frogs here. They're of the same species, but they are different colors because in this environment, probably a woodland forest, like similar to the frogs we'd see around here, the darker the color, the more likely it is to survive. A bird or whatever predator would eat the frog, it wouldn't be able to see the frog so well. So the ones that blend in survive, and the ones that maybe had a greener color or a brighter color would not survive. But if you look here in a rainforest, a tree frog is very dark green. It matches the leaves of its environment again because the frog with the greener color would be more likely to survive, live long enough into adulthood to lay eggs and have young of its own and pass those traits along. That's why the passing of traits was so important, as we discussed in our last unit. So here, adaptations. Adaptations are change. A characteristic that helps an organism to survive in a particular environment is called an adaptation. In other words, organisms are adapted to their environment. Clownfish live in sea. I always forget how to pronounce this word. Anemones, I believe. They have an adaptation that makes them immune from the anemone sting. So they can safely hide from predators in the anemone. So anyway, the clownfish has developed a basic, like almost like a vaccine. It's immune. It has a natural occurring chemical in its body that causes it to be immune to the sting of the anemone. And therefore, over time, the clownfish with the better chemicals to deflect that sting have survived so long that now clownfish are immune to the sting. That's the change that takes place. That's evolution. Adaptations. Many animals that live in cold environments have thick fur to protect them from the low temperatures. If you look here at the polar bear and the Arctic fox, okay, it is not a coincidence that they both have similar skin and fur. Again, as I said about the color of the skin and fur, but also the layer of fat that keeps it warm. Okay, if you look here at the harp seal, you can barely see it, it's blending in. And then snowshoe hare or a rabbit must be somewhere in here because I can't see it, and it's blending in very well with its environment. So those are the changes that take place. Those beneficial traits have been passed down. But if you put a polar bear into the desert, well, obviously it's not going to survive there. It would overheat. Okay, it's got thick fur and webbed feet for swimming. It can't swim in the desert. There's no water. It wouldn't have beneficial traits for that environment. So this is further evidence that the polar bear has adapted to its environment over, I'm talking thousands and thousands of years, so that it could better survive its environment. And here you can see the polar bear were moved to the desert, it would overheat. Its fur is too thick. It wouldn't be able to use its webbed feet. It wouldn't be able to travel very well across the desert. It would not survive. So the adaptations of an organism enable it to survive its environment. The adaptation leads to variation. So the changes lead to the trait variation is what we discussed in our last unit. Okay, different animals are born with different traits. You do not look just like your brother or just like your sister or just like your mom or dad. There's changes. And in the natural world, outside in nature, the animals that have the better traits will survive. It is called survival of the fittest. Animals that are weaker or slower or brighter, if it needs to blend in, it won't live long enough to survive. If you look here, the snapper fish, the blue striped snappers, there's a little bit of variation between them. They're not all identical. Okay, and I suppose that the bluer ones in this case would probably survive a little bit better, as it would blend in better. And these fish are prey, but they don't all look the same. That's the point. If you look here at these giraffes, okay, the different giraffes have different colors. I'm not sure what the different colors, how they benefit each giraffe, but giraffes live in different parts of Africa, and depending on where in Africa the giraffes live, I'm sure the colors help it in some way. But we know giraffes are absolutely perfect examples of biological evolution because giraffes did not always have these long necks. Giraffes had shorter necks when trees were maybe lower down. Giraffes could eat the leaves off the tree. As more leaves got eaten, as trees adapted, trees were growing their leaves taller up, higher up, so that they wouldn't be eaten. While the giraffes also had to adapt. So the taller giraffes survived because it got the leaves. It was able to pass the tallness down, and eventually, over many, many generations, the giraffe had a much longer neck on average. And that's the adaptation, the variation, and the evolution that takes place here. Okay, we talk a lot about dogs. They have many different traits and variations that are suited to help it either work or run or hunt or be a lap dog to help keep people warm. Remember, dogs did not really evolve naturally because humans interfered. So variation leads to survival. If we look, okay, we talked about the moths. Okay, um, they're not pictured here, but we talked about the moths and how they had to blend into their environment to survive. And when the environment got polluted, uh, the darker moths survived, and then the species became darker. And then when the forest got cleaned up, the lighter moths survived, and then the moths became lighter again. Okay. So I've noticed that there are some mistakes with this slideshow. Um, so the moths are not pictured here, but here we see some peacocks, and that is going to go here. Variations lead to mating. Female peacocks choose a mate with the longest, brightest feathers. In a population of peacocks, which males will be able to mate most often? It's the ones with the bigger, brighter feathers. So over time, peacocks have developed bigger, brighter feathers. So having the long, bright tail feathers, it's an adaptation that led to variation. Okay, it led to the change in the traits. Okay, if you look here, bowerbird males build and decorate nests with nuts, berries, stones, and petals. The female mates with the owner of the nest she likes best, the more decorated nest. So these behaviors are adaptations. So the birds mate and lay the eggs, and then baby birds are hatch, and then those birds inherit the behaviors of the parent bird, and then over time birds continue this behavior, and as we learned, behaviors can be inherited too. Okay, that is all for today, so you're going to have to answer just a quick question or two about adaptation and variation, and that will be it for today. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and tomorrow I'm going to have you watch a video on Brain Pop on one of the best scientists in biology of all time, and my favorite, Charles Darwin. Okay, so that will be it for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.